The Battle of the Bulge, also known as the Ardennes Offensive, was one of the most significant and costly battles of World War II. It was one of the last desperate attempts by the Germans to turn the tide after the invasion of Normandy. They hoped to achieve a decisive victory by pushing through the Allied lines, splitting their forces, and then driving towards the port of Antwerp. The Germans used a variety of tanks in this battle, including the Panther and the King Tiger. On this episode of Blueprints of War, we will investigate the weaponry used by both sides in one of the most fiercely contested battles fought by the Allies during World War II. A member of the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler-Jugend wrote to his sister on the eve of battle.
Dear Ruth, my daily letter will be very short today, short and sweet. I write during one of the great hours before an attack, full of unrest, full of expectation for what the next days will bring. Everyone who has been here the last 2 days and nights, especially nights, who has witnessed hour after hour the assembly of our crack divisions, who has heard the constant rattling of panzers, knows that something is up, and we are looking forward to a clear order to reduce the tension. We are still in the dark as to where and how, but that cannot be helped. It is enough to know that we attack, and will throw the enemy from our homeland. That is a holy task.
On the back of the sealed envelope, he added a hurried postscript.
Ruth, we march!
That must have been scribbled as they moved out, for the letter fell into American hands during battle. The Battle of the Bulge, one of the largest battles of World War II, was fought on the Western Front in Europe from December 16, 1944, to January 25, 1945. It took place primarily in the Ardennes region, spanning Belgium, France, and Luxembourg. This was the last major German offensive campaign on the Western Front during World War II, and it was named for the bulge created in American lines by the German attack. The Ardennes Offensive, as it is also known, was launched with the aim of splitting the Allied lines and preventing their use of the Belgian port of Antwerp. The Germans hoped to divide the Allied armies and stave off impending defeat for a little while longer. If the attack were to succeed in capturing Antwerp, 4 complete armies would be trapped without supplies behind German lines. Unfortunately for the German ambitions, they did not have the tanks, aircraft, fuel, or offensive punch left to even reach Antwerp. Despite this, they pressed on with the offensive, launching a surprise attack through the densely forested Ardennes region of eastern Belgium, northeast France, and Luxembourg. The Allies were caught off guard by the German attack, and for a time, the German forces made significant gains. To further understand how the battles played out, we first need to look at the hardware used on each side. At this stage in the war, the German forces had a mix of different tanks, including both older and newer models. One of the main tanks used by the Germans was the Panzer IV, which had been in service since the early stages of the war. There was, of course, the Panther, a medium tank introduced in 1943. The German forces also had a limited number of Tiger II tanks, also known as the Königstiger or King Tiger. The Tiger II had very thick armor and was a formidable opponent for any Allied tank. Panzerwaffe, meaning tank force or armored arm, was the term used to describe the armored forces of the German army during World War II. The Panzerwaffe was an essential part of the German military machine. It was not only an instrument of war, but also a symbol of German military might, and its tanks and other armored vehicles were a constant reminder to the world of Germany's military prowess. It consisted of a wide variety of armored vehicles, including light tanks, heavy tanks, self-propelled guns, armored personnel carriers, and other support vehicles. These vehicles were designed to provide the German army with a mobile and flexible force that could rapidly exploit weaknesses in enemy defenses and quickly maneuver across the battlefield. The German army placed a strong emphasis on the development and deployment of these vehicles, and the Panzerwaffe became an integral part of the German military doctrine. Its early success can be attributed to the blitzkrieg tactics that were employed by the German army. The blitzkrieg was a lightning-fast military strategy that relied on the rapid deployment of armored vehicles and infantry to quickly overwhelm enemy defenses. The Panzerwaffe played a key role in this strategy, providing the German army with the mobility and firepower it needed to quickly gain ground and achieve victory. However, as the war progressed, it began to suffer from a lack of resources and a decline in effectiveness. The demands of the war effort placed a tremendous strain on the German economy, and the production of new tanks and other armored vehicles became increasingly difficult. The backbone of the Panzerwaffe was primarily made up of the Panzer Division, which was a powerful fighting force consisting of a Panzer Brigade, 2 motorized or mechanized infantry regiments, and various support elements. All the units within the Panzer Division were highly mobile and designed to operate in close coordination with one another. The division included self-propelled artillery, self-propelled anti-tank, and armored reconnaissance cars, among other types of armored vehicles. However, following the successful campaigns in Poland and France, the Panzer divisions were reorganized and reduced in size. Instead of having 2 tank regiments, each division was left with only 1 Panzer regiment. This was a strategic decision taken to create several new divisions using the available tanks. Despite the reduction in size, the Panzer division remained a formidable force on the battlefield. The Panzer IV was a medium tank that was extensively used by the German army during World War II. Developed in the mid-1930s, the Panzer IV was initially designed to provide infantry support and anti-tank capabilities. It had a crew of 5 and was armed with a 7.5 centimeters gun, which was later upgraded to a longer 7.5 centimeters gun in response to the improved armor of Allied tanks. The Panzer IV was 23 feet in length and 9.4 foot in width, with a height of 8.8 feet and a tonnage of 27.6 tons. The Panzer IV was also equipped with a coaxial machine gun and a hull-mounted machine gun, which provided additional firepower to engage enemy infantry. The Panzer IV saw extensive use on both the eastern and western fronts. During the early stages of the war, the Panzer IV was the backbone of the German armored forces and was involved in many of the key battles of the conflict. Despite being outmatched by newer and more heavily armored tanks, such as the Soviet T-34, the Panzer IV remained in service throughout the war and underwent numerous upgrades to improve its combat capabilities. One of its strengths was its ability to adapt to changing battlefield conditions. As the war progressed and Allied tanks became more heavily armored, the Panzer IV was upgraded with thicker armor and more powerful guns. Later variants of the Panzer IV were also equipped with infrared night vision equipment, which allowed them to operate effectively in low-light conditions. Over 8,500 Panzer IV tanks were produced during the war, making it one of the most produced German tanks. Despite being eventually outclassed by newer tanks like the Panther and Tiger, the Panzer IV remained a vital component of the German armored forces and played a key role in many of the major battles on the eastern and western fronts. The Panzer IV demonstrated the German army's ability to develop and refine armored vehicles throughout the course of the war. The Tiger II, or Königstiger meaning King Tiger, was a heavy tank that was developed by Germany in response to the Allied forces' increasing use of heavily armored tanks on the battlefield during World War II. It was designed as an upgrade to the Tiger I tank, which was already considered one of the most potent tanks of the time. The Tiger II was larger and heavier than its predecessor, and it had a more powerful engine to support the increased weight of the tank. The Tiger II was 33.7 feet in length and 12.3 foot in width, with a height of 10.1 feet and a weight of 153,662 pounds. One of the most notable features of the Tiger II was its thick armor, which was up to 180 millimeters thick in some areas. The armor was sloped to help deflect incoming rounds, and the tank's turret was also heavily armored. This made the Tiger II one of the most heavily armored tanks of the war, and it was extremely difficult to penetrate for most Allied tanks. The Tiger II was also armed with an 8.8 centimeters gun, which was a significant upgrade from the 7.5 centimeters gun used on the Tiger I. This gun was capable of penetrating the armor of most Allied tanks at long range, and it was often used to engage enemy tanks from a distance. Despite its impressive armor and firepower, the Tiger II suffered from a number of mechanical issues that limited its effectiveness on the battlefield. The tank's engine was prone to overheating, and the suspension system was prone to failure, which made the tank difficult to maneuver in certain conditions. In total, only around 500 Tiger II tanks were produced during the war, and they saw limited use on the battlefield. However, the tank remains a notable example of the development of heavy tanks during the war, and is often regarded as one of the most formidable armored vehicles of the conflict. The Tiger II had a significant impact on the design of future tanks, and many of its features were incorporated into post-war tanks developed by other countries. The tank's thick armor and powerful gun influenced the development of tanks like the Soviet IS-3 and the American M26 Pershing. The Tiger II's legacy lives on to this day, as it remains a popular subject for historians and military enthusiasts who study the technological advances made during the war. The German tanks used in the Battle of the Bulge were superior to the Allied tanks in many ways. They were better armored, had more powerful guns, and were more maneuverable. However, the Germans also had some weaknesses in their tanks. They were often unreliable, difficult to maintain, and used more fuel than their Allied counterparts. In our upcoming episode, we will delve deep into the riveting historical events surrounding the Battle of the Bulge. As the battle nears its climactic conclusion, our focus will be on the formidable armor utilized by the Allied forces, with a particular emphasis on the gripping siege of Bastogne. Join us as we unravel the fascinating tale of the armored might deployed by the Allies during this pivotal moment in history.